I'm guessing the nerves are a little bit different from you two, so it will be interesting to hear different perspectives, as it always is. Matt, your initial takeaways from what turned out to be a little closer than the experts might have expected.
Yeah, so Tim will get the floor. He'll get his rebuttal. He'll get his time. But for me, like, I have officially now. This is not like permanent, set in stone. But right now, I'm downgrading USC from 11-1 to 10-2, based on what I saw. Like, I like that this game makes me feel significantly less confident that Alex Grinch is going to figure this thing out. With Notre Dame, Utah, Oregon, and Washington, USC needs to win 3 of those 4 to get to 11-1. Right now, I'm thinking 2-2 in those 4 games, based on what I saw against Arizona State. So let's go through this. Like, you know, USC fans in the chat, just you, or USC fans just watching this show here at the Voice of College Football, like you've said this either to yourself or to your friends and family over the past 48 hours since that Arizona State game. Let's go through some of the main arguments and talking points. One argument and talking point is, well, hey, Georgia had clunkers last year. Georgia played a bad game against Missouri. Georgia played a terrible offensive game against Kentucky, but it worked out all right. Georgia was fine. Georgia won the national title. Okay, basic thing. Georgia's climbed the mountain. Georgia's run the race. Georgia's done the whole damn thing. USC has not. Lincoln Riley has not. Alex Grinch has not. There is a difference. There is proof of concept here. You know, benefit of the doubt, you get it when you do it, right? You get it when you go all the way. You get it when you come through in those major man-making motivational moments. Georgia's done that. USC under Lincoln Riley has not done it yet. USC could, but you can't assign the same level of likelihood, the same level of probability to those two things. Like, USC is not Georgia. USC is not where Georgia is. USC wants to be Georgia. USC is trying to get to where Georgia is. So there is a certain thing about benefit of the doubt. There's a certain thing about proof of concept. You can't trust Alex Grinch to fix things on defense the way you can trust Kirby Smart. Like, when Georgia has a clunker, they get it fixed. You know, they take care of their business the next several weeks, and they get where they need to go. USC has to clear that hurdle before we give the same benefit of the doubt to Alex Grinch and Lincoln Riley. Here's the second big talking point. You know, it's early in the season, and you know, they've been rotating lots of players. And again, I like that. That's been good. You have needed to rotate lots of players. So I get it. Like, you're not going to have ultimate continuity right now because you're still trying to learn. You're still trying to get your depth chart sorted. You're still trying to figure out some position battles. Definitely recognize that. Definitely see that. Definitely appreciate the volatility and the lack of continuity you're going to get at several position groups, offensive line as well as on defense. Totally understand that. But, and here's the big point of concern. The Cotton Bowl was bad on its own terms, but it was also really bad because USC had 4 weeks off after the Pac-12 championship game against Utah. 4 weeks to reorganize, mentally regroup, get everything lined up, get some guys who are physically and mentally refreshed after really taking a pounding late in that 2022 regular season. So with time off, you come back to the Cotton Bowl and you're thinking, all right, going to be better, going to be stronger, going to be more disciplined, you know, going to be really fundamentally sound. And it was exactly the opposite. It was worse. There was regression after time off. So, you know, I was making a big deal about, oh, this unit gets time off. You know, get these guys on the practice field. Lots of teaching, lots of drilling deeper on technique, you know, lots of ingraining some good solid habits with this week off early in the season. Great teaching time for Alex Grinch. What do we see? We see regression like the Cotton Bowl. You know, time off should sharpen you, not weaken you as a defensive unit, as a team. Like, that is really concerning. Why is time off eroding the instincts of players instead of making them sharper? Like, this team could not tie its freaking shoelaces in that first half. Offensive line rattled as though those guys had never played a road game in their lives. Like, this was not Death Valley, Clemson or LSU. This was not the Horseshoe. This was not the Big House. This was not an intimidating road environment. This was Tempe, all right? Like, at least if it was Autzen, if it was Husky Stadium, fine. This was Tempe. And guys were rattled. Guys were thrown way off balance, and plays weren't getting in. And Lincoln Riley was pulling a Clay Helton. Let's just call it for what it was. Plays weren't getting in. Timeouts were getting burned early in both halves. That's Clay Helton crap against Arizona State. And that really brings us to the other point, that USC had a big-time clunker precisely at this point on the calendar last year. Oregon State, September 24, 2022. This was September 23rd, 2023. So pretty much week 4 had a clunker. And, so like that's part of the story, but it's not the whole story, because last year, that clunker in Corvallis, Oregon State was good last year. Oregon State won 10 games last year. Our friend Connor Johnson knows all about that. Oregon State had a really tough defense. Oregon State's really well drilled and well schooled under Jonathan Smith. We all knew before the season that was going to be a hornet's nest in Corvallis. That was going to be a tough game. And that was a game that, like, we knew going in, where USC just needed to survive with a W. Didn't have to look pretty. Team didn't have to play great. Just get the win to make sure you get to the Pac-12 championship game. And that's what the team did. Sucked it up. Wasn't pretty, but found a way. The Nealon nudge, Brett Nealon late in the game, and then Caleb Williams throwing the dart to Jordan Addison. It was ugly as heck, but it was a win, and it was impressive because we respected Oregon State. We knew how good that team was. Arizona State, 2023. Like, hey, credit the Sun Devils. Great effort. Kenny Dillingham coached rings around Alex Grinch, for the first 3 quarters before that lack of depth on ASU's offensive line finally settled in, and the USC pass rush was finally able to really feast at the banquet table. But where was that feasting in the first half? In the first half, it was the Dillingham show, and he was reaching into his bag of tricks. He was throwing the kitchen sink, and USC didn't see any of this on film, and guys were just scrambling around like headless horsemen, running in the wrong directions. It felt like the Cotton Bowl all over again. But Arizona State was down 4 starting offensive linemen. Arizona State's roster was missing 10 players who were either projected preseason starters or who had started earlier in the season. That's not Oregon State 2022 in Corvallis. When you have a clunker against a good team versus when you have a clunker against a skeletal team in the middle of a rebuild in the first year of a coach's tenure, those are 2 very different contexts, 2 very different situations in which to have a clunker. Like, if the fact that USC might not have been very sharp or very focused, and you're looking ahead to Big Noon Saturday against Colorado, like, I get that. Like, that's also part of the reality in college football, and you're not going to have the same level of mental focus for all 12 games on your schedule. Like, that's why Nick Saban plays the Citadel or Chattanooga. You do need to give guys a mental breather, but you shouldn't be cutting it this close against this Arizona State team in year 1 under Dillingham. You should not be cutting it this close. Like, I can accept the various errors, but like USC still should have been up 21 in the 4th quarter instead of up only 6, with ASU having the ball and a chance to actually take the lead. So when we have these various conversations about, Georgia had clunkers last year and it was fine, or, guys are going to look ahead to Colorado, boys will be boys, get that too. And, you're not going to have the same mental intensity the whole season. Look, guys, I get it. I've been covering this sport for a couple decades. I know those things. But this Arizona State team is a team that USC should have beaten like a drum, should have thrown it around like a dirty old rag, and USC was sweating bullets several minutes into the 4th quarter. I mean, if you're not concerned by that, okay, but what does history tell us about Lincoln Riley and Alex Grinch? They're not at the Kirby Smart standard. They're not at the Nick Saban standard. They have to prove this, and we shouldn't just accept the idea, oh, they're going to figure it out. They got this. Really? They have to earn that status back. They lost it this week. They can get it back, but they lost it this week, and that's why I'm going from 11-1 to 10-2 as my season prediction. Tim, you have the floor.
So just really quickly, I don't have to invoke Georgia last year against Kent State and Missouri. We can talk about last week. We can talk about the week before. You got programs like Texas, which is a good team. They struggle against Wyoming. We saw what happened to FSU against Boston College. That's bizarre. Scratch your head on that one. How the hell was it that close, right? LSU, Arkansas. We can go round and round, Matt, all we want. The reason why this is because this game's played by 18 to 23-year-old kids. Young men, kids, whatever. I was a kid at 23. I don't know. Maybe you matured faster than me, but I was.
No, I didn't.
I didn't know my what's the old phrase? My butt from my elbow, right? I mean, it was just basically that's what I was doing in those years. These kids are like this. We forget these kids have girlfriends. We forget these kids have friends going out on the weekends. These guys are not robots. These are young men that lack focus. That's coaching, though. Coming in this game, knowing that these kids are probably not going to take them very seriously. It's attention to detail. And so if I'm going to be critical, I'm going to say I think that, let's face it, though. I mean, in teaching, you can get the best lesson plan, everything going, and get the kids ready to go. And if the kids are having a bad day, it's not going to matter how wonderful you are as a teacher. That kid's thinking about grandma in the hospital. I mean, this game was very undisciplined. The mental errors were ridiculous. Matter of fact, Lincoln Riley himself said, as far as the penalties were concerned, he said it was shitty coaching. That comes down to coaching and discipline. That is absolutely a coaching thing. He took that one on the chin. But what I liked about it says they asked about the offense. He says, well, I feel about as disappointed as you can, averaging 9 yards per play, Matt. As clunky as we want to say that deep offense was, they averaged 9 yards a play, right? 11 yards a carry, 16 yards a pass attempt. I mean, come on. That's, we are getting a little bit ridiculous when we start. Oh, sorry, not pass attempt. Sorry. 16 yards per catch. Sorry. All those numbers are spectacular on any metric. And yet we are saying they scored 42 points. They only scored 42. The first road trip, conference game, we can crack on them all they want, but we've always had trouble going down to the desert and playing Arizona State. Historically. Dillingham didn't call the plays in the first 3 games of the year. He made a good point as well about the fact that he had all week. He knew Drew Pine was a starter. When you're your 4th-string quarterback, that guy didn't take any reps with the ones. You didn't game plan for his strengths. That Fresno State game, you got to throw that thing out the window. And one of my favorite things also about this is Riley made it very clear. It didn't pull punches when it comes to people saying, oh, well, look what they did against Fresno State and USC barely did this. Do you really think that those kids are jacked up to play Fresno State? Do you think that crowd was jacked up and full like it was for USC coming into ASU? It's a completely different environment. Did USC play undisciplined ball? Absolutely. It looked like a mess at times, right? Did it look like Dillingham knew that we had aggressive linebackers and safeties that would overrun plays, and all you got to do is just scheme for that, and they'll try to run themselves play? Absolutely. And that looked pretty obvious. We had a true freshman middle linebacker starting in that game. It looked like it at times, right? Did we have tackling issues? Yes, this was the worst tackling I've seen. This is a total regression from what we've seen the first 3 games. Totally agree with you. But they still had 8 sacks, 14 tackles for loss, and 3 turnovers. The team only gave up, really, if you want to give be on the defense, the fact that the offense turned the ball over on the 12-yard line and that the first touchdown they got was on 12-yard field, I'm throwing that one out the window. So really the defense gave up 21 points. Every gadget play, everything he had in his bag of tricks, Dillingham pulled out in that first half. They did Wildcat, then they punted out a Wildcat, then they did a fake punt out of Wildcat and threw the ball. I mean, they did everything in this game. And they were, USC, did they ever trail a game? Not once. Matt is worried and sloppy. Look, did you ever worry they were going to lose this game at any point, even in the 3rd quarter?
Oh, yeah. 10 minutes left in the 4th quarter, up only 6. ASU with the ball. Defense not absolutely locking it down.
Did you think we were going to lose, though?
I never thought USC was likely to lose.
Right.
But losing was a legitimate possibility with 10 minutes left in the game. And when you're a 35-point favorite and you get that close to the edge, like it never got right to the edge, but like USC was within 100 yards of the edge.
Oh,
To-
you know
to
this,
me,
Matt.
To me, that's cause for alarmism.
A 35-point spread does not mean you're 35 points better than the opponent. It means that the public thinks that you're 35 points more than the opponent. Really? What did that line start out at? Do you know, Matt?
34. It moved up
Just
point
one
over the course of the week.
So
yeah,
USC.
I mean, but it's not just And hey, like this was ASU's Super Bowl, and Dillingham gave them a ton of things on film that they hadn't seen and hadn't prepared for. We totally acknowledged, but
Yeah.
the depth on ASU's roster was non-existent, missing 10 starter quality players, missing 4 starting offensive linemen. Come on, folks, like and 8 sacks. USC got, I think, like 6 of those 8 sacks in that really good 15-minute segment from about 5 minutes left in the third quarter to 5 minutes left in the game when ASU had to throw. Most of those sack, pressure, hit stats came in that 15-minute segment. In the first half, that was not happening. Like, we did not see USC's defensive line dominate from the start. And against a hollowed out offensive line, this defensive line needed to have dominated. If we were going to say, you know what, this defensive line is fundamentally on track, it's fundamentally on course, it's on schedule, evolving at the rate it needs to, so that when you play Notre Dame and you play Utah, 2 teams that are known for physical line play, you are going to be ready to match that standard. If you can't toss around an undermanned Arizona State offensive line for a full game, and you have to wait until the attrition sets in late in the third quarter to finally start feasting on a regular basis, again, we should have seen that feasting, which occurred midway through the second half. We should have seen that all night long, and it didn't happen. To me, that's cause for concern. And like the depth, the better depth on the defensive line, which was a talking point in the offseason and in the early weeks of the regular season, like we didn't see that. We did not see, this defensive line just swarming and overwhelming a weaker, undermanned opponent in the first 30 minutes. It didn't happen until the fourth quarter. You go against a Kyle Whittingham coached Utah offensive line. You go against a Notre Dame offensive line. Man, it is hard to have confidence that this defensive line is going to be ready to answer the bell.
So, I mean, that's where I disagree. So we're really looking at a couple plays here. Let's look at that last touchdown. So do we agree on the point that the fact that they gave up that touchdown from the 12-yard line is really not on the defense? Can we do that?
Sure,
we say that that's really not on your defense.
Totally.
Okay. So then on that last touchdown they get, both Eric Gentry and I think it was Max Williams both missed tackles on that was 4th down, right, Matt? It was 4th down. They stopped him short of the sticks. That's the end. That's the end. They're done. And we're talking about a whole different ball game. And then the defense gave up 14 points. I've been talking since week 1, week 2, week 3. Now we're in week 4. My issue with this defense isn't the day-to-day operations, isn't first through third down. It's these explosives that they've been giving up. You can't give up chunk plays. You could play a fundamentally good game and give up 3 or 4 chunk plays against good teams, and you're going to lose. You're just going to lose.
But was this fundamentally a good game? Like you were seeing repeated breakdowns in the first half. You were seeing, remember, one of the big things was run fits from last season. Run fits were not there on Saturday. You guys were going into the wrong gaps. ASU was cutting back, and guys were way over pursuing. Also on that trick play, that throwback pass, you had 3 USC players going after the running back before he threw the throwback screen to Drew Pine. No discipline or gap integrity. And like, even though we acknowledge that Kenny Dillingham showed USC so many looks that did not show up on film, like, we can acknowledge that Kenny Dillingham reserved his very best. He totally emptied the grab bag for USC. And so I can definitely acknowledge that there were lots of things that we didn't see on film, but that doesn't fully account for all of the over pursuits and all of the guys.
I'm not arguing that.
First half.
Yeah, I'm not arguing.
You can
I'm not arguing that, Matt.
Some of this was situational and contextual, but some of it was basic lack of discipline from the Alex Grinch defense.
That's what I started at the very beginning, Matt. If you remember, I said the issue of this game was a lack of focus and a lack of discipline. What's getting absurd is people are saying it's scheme. It's this wasn't scheme. This wasn't an issue. This wasn't about this was about players not making plays, over pursuing, not breaking down, and not squaring up, and not driving through their tackles, and not wrapping up. These guys weren't wrapped. They were showing very, very poor technique in their tackling. They're doing, even Riley said, a bunch of shoulder. They're trying to thud guys and bump guys instead of wrapping them up, driving them to the ground. They just weren't doing that. And so we
have to say, like, year two, right? Year two, the habits are ingrained. Year two, you get that solidity, that consistency from the coaching staff. It's not there, or at least it certainly wasn't there against ASU. So you look at Alex Grinch's reputation. Like, I cannot give him the benefit of the doubt right now. Now, maybe
I know you made it clear. You jumped off the train.
I can't give it to him right now.
It's clear you've jumped off the train. Here's what I'm saying. I haven't seen anything to convince me of it yet. Right? I'm not bought in to the whole Grinch thing, but certainly I can see that the guys are in position, should be in position to make tackles, and they're not making tackles. Ultimately, that's on the coaching. Ultimately, that's on the coaching. Got no issue with that. But what I am saying is you take out that fumble on the 12-yard line, and that was that Grinch's fault or the scheme or anything? Those two guys couldn't make a tackle before the sticks.
First touchdown is on the offense.
Absolutely not, Matt. And so here's the thing.
But it also raises the point.
Matt, hold on. All right. Matt, hold on. Here's the thing. Then they score 14 points. Are we having this conversation if it was a 42-14 game?
No.
That's my only point.
It was
sloppy. It was sloppy. They got to cut down the explosives. They can't handle the ball at the 12-yard line. But overall, it's a bad team. But overall, that bad team really should have only scored 14 points. And if we're bitching about the offense, it did look clunky at times. People are saying we should have ran the ball more. I would like to see more running. But look at the snap. Look at the snap count. It was pretty even. I think they probably threw the ball 2 or 3 more times than they ran the ball. If you go back and look at the plays, they probably ran about 2 or 3 or 4 more run plays. 2 more. They ran 2 more pass plays. It was pretty balanced. And I get it when you say, well, you got to go with what's working. You don't balance for balance sake. It's stupid. We were running the ball at 12 yards, 11 yards a clip. Go with the run. But they were throwing at 16 yards of reception. So people jumping on, again, the one thing I'm not going to ever jump on is the offensive play calling. That's a bit off base. But the defense just need to tighten up those things. I'm not, the sky's not falling. People are freaking out right now about this defense. They're going to show us what they have when they play the big boys. They weren't going to get any credit for shutting this team out. They played sloppy. They played undisciplined. But like I said to you, Matt, good teams have bad games. Because it's played by college kids. That's really what it comes down to. If, however, we follow up in Colorado like this, and then we roll in and Arizona runs all over us, and then God forbid, talk about not being able to tackle. We play Estime. That's going to be scary in South Bend if they don't figure out this tackling. They'd be wrapping up and they're gang tackle that guy because he's a difference maker for sure. So my short thing to wrap it all up is you take away the 12-yard thing there. Now you have a 21 score point game. And Eric Gentry's got to make that tackle. Max Williams will tell you he needs to make that tackle. Those two guys missed tackles on that play. Otherwise, it's the turnover on downs. SC going the other direction. I think everyone needs to chill out. It was not a good game. And one more thing also, I talked about Bird and I talked about Muhammad. Romello Height had a game. He had himself a game. He when he's not getting there, he's flushing, And someone talked earlier about one thing about Bear Alexander, he's not getting a bunch of sacks. Someone said, where was it? Oh, Bear's gonna have 4 sacks. I'd love to have that. But what this guy's doing, he's not getting in the stat sheet. And your defensive tackle usually doesn't, get the stat sheet that often, unless you're playing for the Rams. But you're looking for him to kind of push that pocket back, collapse that pocket, so the quarterback can't step up in the pocket, and then the guys clean up from the outside. And that's exactly why we're seeing Muhammad and Bird and Romello getting home, is because that quarterback's got nowhere to go. And so he's doing his job. He's just slamming. He's pushing that line backwards, and that the quarterback can't step up and then just leave him wide open. So that's why I'm saying, we'll see how Nix and Penix do against that situation. They haven't faced that this year.